This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence, sexual assault, and disturbing criminal conduct. Some listeners may find the content distressing. The events discussed involve real victims and their families. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The date was February 14th, 1960, and the small island of Jersey was engulfed in darkness. In the early hours of the morning, a relentless rain pounded against the rooftops and windows of the quiet homes scattered across the landscape. The streets were deserted, with only the occasional flicker of a streetlight illuminating the slick, glistening pavement. In the depths of his slumber, a young 12-year-old boy found himself lost in a vivid dream. He stood on a baseball diamond, the bright sun overhead, and the cheers of the crowd filling his ears. As he looked to the stands, he saw the smiling faces of his father and friends' parents, their expressions full of pride and encouragement. The boy felt a surge of joy and confidence, ready to take on the world. But as he continued to scan the bleachers, his gaze fell upon a figure that seemed out of place. A man, dressed in a long, dark coat, slowly rose from his seat and began walking towards the field. As he drew closer, the boy's heart began to race, a sense of unease washing over him. The man's appearance was grotesque and frightening. His face was obscured by a rubber mask that resembled melted skin, its surface pitted and scarred. The coat he wore was adorned with inch-long nails protruding menacingly from the collar, cuffs, and shoulders. His hands were encased in rough, textured gloves, the fingers stiff and unyielding. With each step, the masked figure drew closer, his presence becoming more oppressive and terrifying. The boy found himself rooted to the spot, unable to move or cry out. The cheers of the crowd faded away, replaced by an eerie, deafening silence. As the man reached the edge of the field, he slowly extended his gloved hand towards the boy. The rough, gnarled texture of the glove seemed to beckon, inviting the child to take hold. In a trance-like state, the boy reached out, his small hand trembling as it neared the outstretched fingers. The moment their hands touched, the dream began to shift and blur, the edges of reality fraying like a worn tapestry. The baseball diamond dissolved, replaced by the familiar contours of the boy's bedroom. But the masked figure remained, his presence just as vivid and terrifying as it had been in the dream. In a daze, the boy allowed himself to be led towards the window, the rain outside pounding against the glass. The man's grip was firm and unyielding, guiding the child out into the storm. As they stepped through the window and into the night, the boy's mind struggled to differentiate between the realm of dreams and the waking world, the line between the two becoming increasingly blurred. With each step, they moved further away from the safety of home, the rain soaking through their clothes and the darkness swallowing them whole. The boy, still caught in the web of his own subconscious, followed the beast of Jersey into the unknown, unaware of the horrors that lay ahead. Little did the sleeping residents know that the nightmare that had visited one young boy that night was just the beginning. A shadow of evil had fallen over their small island, and the tight-knit community would be forced to confront a monster they could never have imagined. The beast of Jersey had arrived, and with him came a decade of terror that forever changed this once idyllic isle. The boy who walked out into the night with the beast survived his encounter, though the memories of that rain-soaked February night haunted him for decades to come. Like many of the beast's victims, he carried not just the physical scars, but the psychological weight of knowing that monsters don't just exist in stories. They walk among us, wearing masks both literal and figurative. And just 6 weeks after the beast's first haunting, he would claim yet another victim. I warn you, what you're about to hear isn't just a true crime story. It's a journey into the heart of darkness itself, where ancient evil meets modern madness, and where some questions are better left unanswered. Jersey has been described as a little bit of rustic paradise, which accidentally drifted into the English Channel. The lush British Isle lies only 15 miles from the coast of France. It might sound like a strange place for a monster to roam in such a small community. But the beast could thrive in a place where people left their doors unlocked, where children played freely in the streets, where everyone knew their neighbor's name, or at least thought they did. In 1960, Jersey was exactly that kind of small-town paradise. Its narrow lanes wound between stone cottages and blooming gardens. Its beaches stretched golden against the turquoise sea, and its people lived in the kind of blessed ignorance that comes from generations of peace and prosperity. But on March 27, 1960, at precisely 1:30 in the morning, that vision of an idyllic paradise evaporated into sea. One abduction 6 weeks prior excused as a cautionary tale, a fluke. What would happen in a cottage in the parish of Saint Marin over the next few hours shattered not just 2 lives, but the entire island's sense of security. It would expose the dark currents running beneath Jersey's peaceful surface, currents that perhaps had been there all along the island's history. The Black Labrador's behavior was more than unusual. It was a warning. For 13 years, the loyal pet had kept to an unwavering routine, sleeping peacefully by the warmth of the downstairs stove. But on this rain-soaked night, something had changed. The dog paced anxiously at the bottom of the stairs, its nails clicking against the wooden floors, before breaking another sacred rule, ascending to the upper floor. In her bedroom, the woman stirred, unsettled by her pet's strange behavior. Her husband's absence, he lay in a hospital bed miles away, seemed to press against her like a physical weight. The cottage felt different tonight, larger somehow, its familiar shadows deeper, its corners darker. Pulling her robe tight around her shoulders, the woman moved toward the stairs. The wooden banister felt cold beneath her fingers. Each step down seemed to take an eternity, the darkness below growing deeper, more absolute. At the bottom of the stairs, she reached for the light switch. Her fingers found it just as the power failed, plunging the cottage into total darkness. And in that moment of perfect blackness, she heard it, breathing. Not her own, not her dog's. Someone else was in the cottage with them. That's when she saw it, a beam of light cutting through the night. It was not the warm glow of a neighbor's house or a passing car, but the harsh glare of a flashlight. And behind it, a face that wasn't a face at all. A mask, grotesque and inhuman, its surface catching the light like slick, wet flesh. Before she could scream, rough hands seized her. The stench of sweat and something else, something musty and ancient, filled her nostrils. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Her 14-year-old daughter was awake. In that moment of distraction, as the masked figure's head turned toward the sound, she felt his grip loosen ever so slightly. It was her only chance. The woman burst through the kitchen door and into the rain-soaked night. Her bare feet pounded against the muddy earth as she raced across the field toward her neighbor's cottage. Without her glasses, lost in the struggle, the world was a terrifying blur of darkness and rain. Her fists hammered desperately against doors and windows until one shattered beneath her frenzied blows. But no lights came on. No help arrived. Her screams were swallowed by the storm. Time seemed to stretch like a wire pulled too tight. Every second spent searching for help was another second her daughter remained in danger. The choice before her was impossible. Continue searching for help that might never come, or return to face whatever horror awaited in her cottage. A mother's love knows no fear. When she finally stumbled back through the rain, her home stood silent, the kitchen door swinging in the wind. Both her daughter and the masked figure had vanished into the darkness. In that moment, her world collapsed into a single terrible truth. She had left her child alone with a monster. What happened in the next few hours would forever stain Jersey's history. The beast took the young girl to a nearby field, where he wrapped a rope around her neck. He seemed to derive pleasure from bringing her to the edge of consciousness, tightening the rope until she nearly suffocated, only to loosen it at the last possible moment. Again and again, he played this terrible game, punctuating each release with threats and taunts. When police finally found her, the 14-year-old's face told its own story of horror. Beaten about the head, one eye swollen shut, brutally raped. Yet even in her trauma, she provided investigators with crucial details. Her attacker was between 30 and 40 years old, about 5 feet, 7 inches tall. But it was what police discovered back at the cottage that chilled them to their core. A partially eaten box of raw chicken on the kitchen floor, deliberately placed to distract the family dog. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was calculated, methodical. The Beast of Jersey had been watching, waiting, preparing for his moment. As investigators pieced together the evidence from the February and March attacks, a chilling pattern emerged. The mask, the nail-studded wristlets, the rope. These weren't just weapons. They were signatures of a predator who seemed to revel in the terror he caused. The physical description provided by the victims, a man between 30 and 40 years old, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, cast a shadow of suspicion over hundreds of local men. The beast was hiding among them. He was one of them. As word spread across the island, Jersey began to change. Doors that had never known locks were suddenly bolted. Children who had once played freely in the streets were kept close to home. Neighbors who had trusted each other for generations now cast sideways glances, wondering if the monster wore a familiar face. The Beast of Jersey hadn't just attacked individuals, he had assaulted the very soul of the island. And as the community grappled with this new reality, one question haunted them all. When would he strike again?